All right, Yerevan, Armenia. Um, Great city. Been here about a week, and right over there you can actually see there's a water fountain. They fill the city. It's wonderful. You're walking along, and you will find water fountains. Sometimes like pockets of 5 of them, and people will stop and grab a drink, move on. Lovely culture, lovely people. Steeped in history here, but to look around, you wouldn't really know it. There are relics of the past, but not as many as you might expect for a city that is this ancient. One of the oldest cities in the world. I am going to, I'll take this path, and hopefully it's not going to freak a bunch of people out. They are a relatively reserved culture. I don't think they'll particularly care, but I always feel a little weird, recording walking down the street, because you never know how somebody's going to receive it. For the most part, you usually just get a few looks. But, this is a little farther eastern than I've been ever before, at least going west to east. We're not going to count Japan in that, or Australia. But anyway, really lovely culture, lovely people. Interesting though. So, used to be part of the USSR. Obviously no longer, because there is no USSR. And so you will find around the city, you'll find monuments and things to old Soviet heroes and things like that. I'm going to try to not record these folks so they feel weird. But it's interesting, because you'll be walking along, you'll find those old monuments and just like relics of the Soviet past. The color of the city is uniquely brown. A lot of brown, some pink. But you'll see as we walk along how uniquely brown it is. It's kind of a dark shade for a city. And of course, that's not necessarily uniquely brown, is probably not the right way to describe it. But different from most of like Western Europe in terms of the color of the buildings. But not old architecture. A lot of it's very new. And so, for one of the oldest cities in the world, you would generally think, okay, there are going to be lots of, historical sites and things like that. And there are in places. So about 30 minutes from here by bus is the oldest church in the world, from about 300 AD. I did not make it out there, unfortunately. Would have liked to, but it's the logistics of it sometimes it's just not worth it. When you've got other stuff that just random side quests. I'm going to adjust the zoom here to pull in a little bit more of the city. But, and anybody who knows me knows that I walk down the street and I see a thing and I'm like, oh, I gotta go check that out. So things like that sometimes get in the way of a 30-minute bus trip. 30 minutes there, 30 minutes back, figure 5 hours there, looking around and, looking around that town as well. And then by the time you've done it, it's a whole day. So missed opportunity, but there's always a chance to come back. Anyway, extremely friendly people, but not quick to smile. It's interesting. It's a different sort of, it's just a different approach. But when you get them talking, extremely friendly, extremely helpful, quick to adopt you and say, oh, go check this out, go check that out, try this, try that. And so let's see, let's rewind a little bit here. So Armenia had a recent genocide in 1915 to 1917 by the Ottoman Empire. And so basically what happened there is the Ottomans, I think it was about, obviously the number's always like, there's a range on any genocide. One group will say this, another group will say that. Somewhere in between is probably the reality. But I think the estimates are like 600,000 to 1.5 million people. It was the first genocide of the century, apparently. And then the Germans were like, hold my beer, because of course. And so, people being people, somebody's got to one up the other, I guess. But yeah, really tragic. So what happened is a bunch of people got run out of their homes, as happens in those scenarios, and you ended up with basically Armenians going to Lebanon, going to Iran, to other places. And as a result, what has happened is a lot of them have, their descendants have repatriated to Armenia. So you have it is a somewhat culturally diverse place in that regard, but also somewhat homogenous in some respects, because you have the ethnic Armenians. So really cool, because you can be wandering along and run into an Iranian or a Lebanese person, or obviously Russians, though they don't seem to be as big a contingent. And then the cool thing about this culture is those people will often adopt you, and they'll be telling you all sorts of cool stuff about the place, and sharing their diverse worldviews with you, and just giving you additional perspective. And it's something that you can't really get when you're staying home. You can talk to people from all over the world when you're home, but it's different when you're in their house, and you can actually kind of see culturally the effects of some of those things, because that's from people who haven't experienced your culture and cultural perspective. That is the common belief in your society. And people also speak more freely about things like that within their own. So it's really kind of cool to be able to to talk to, for example, Iranians and hear what they think about Iran, or to talk to a Lebanese person and hear what he thinks about that and what his experience is like, because obviously, Israel has bombed them a number of times over in Lebanon, and then the U.S. has a perpetual conflict with Iran. And the cool thing about it is not only do you hear those perspectives, but you find that, and I feel like this is a very European thing. Americans are okay about it, but not quite as good about it. But there's this understanding in Europe in general that governments are governments, people are people, and while we may have a degree of control over our government, we aren't the government. So people look at it as an opportunity to, converse with somebody different and share cultural perspectives and mutually learn. It's a very open-minded thought process. It's just terrific. So I have wandered into bars that were primarily Armenians. I have wandered into bars that were 40-50% Iranians. So it's actually Iranian New Year, and so a lot of them will come here to party, because apparently you can drink in Iran, but you can only do it in your home. Don't think you can gamble there at all. And so, they will come here to party because it's just right next door. So they come here and celebrate the New Year. So I actually came at a really cool time, because it creates an opportunity to meet people you would never otherwise meet. And what I have found, and no surprise given the history, but what I have found is that Iranians are very Western-minded, very friendly toward us, as people. Granted, those are the ones who have traveled or moved abroad, the ones that I have met. But when I ask them, when I say, hey, would I be safe in Tehran? They say, yeah. They say people would treat you like gold. One guy said, look, you probably won't even be able to pay for things in restaurants because, people are going to want to host you. And he said they just won't take your money. And that actually aligns with things I've heard about Iranian culture in the past, is that that's how they function. The problem, of course, being the government, right? And the conflict with the United States and Israel and how close we are. And, then you have to worry about the government itself, using you there. Always a possibility. So it'd be amazing to be able to go there, but I still think with the political tensions, the geopolitical element, I still think it would probably be a little bit unwise, which is so sad. And Lebanon, my Lebanese buddy, he told me, he said you'd have a great time in Lebanon. He said if you stay on the Christian side of, because there's a bunch of Christians in Lebanon and also a bunch of Muslims in Lebanon, and they live well together. And he said, look, if you stay on the Christian side, you don't even have to worry about getting bombed because it's not the side that gets hit. So really tempting. But then at the same time, you wonder how, in terms of the politics and all of that, and the relationships between the countries, how's that going to go? So I really want to check those places out. Hopefully will someday, probably not right now. Not feeling as reckless as maybe I have in the past. Not overly cautious, but, there are some destinations that might be a little safer, so to speak, than others. This is one of them. Incredibly safe place, incredibly friendly place, amazingly kind people. Not much bad I can say in terms of how I've been treated. My only real criticisms would be some middle-aged men, not many, it's probably a fraction of a percentage, but I've encountered it twice. They do not respect lines. And from what I've read, that's apparently a cultural quirk. The cutting in line is apparently a cultural quirk from Soviet era, because when they had food lines, basically people who bullied their way to the front would get food, and people who didn't would not get food. So you take that, you put somebody through years and years and years of that, and to that person the line doesn't mean anything anymore. It's unfortunate. I feel like we have to adapt as people as the world around us changes. And I think that the vast majority of them have. The vast majority. But it's part of it. So that, and then people will walk. We're not seeing a lot of it right now. It's not really probably late enough for it, but in the evenings, people will walk 5 abreast and block the entire sidewalk. And it makes it difficult when you're not just crawling along in your walk. So in some respects, I'd say in public can be a little oblivious to others, but the thing is, when you engage those people individually, they're going to be incredibly kind. Probably not the guys who cut in line. That's just somewhat fundamental thing at this stage. It's been a minute since Soviet era, and some adaptation should have happened since then. But in terms of the walking 5 abreast, that's, well, I regard it as rude. In this culture, it's not. You just have to find your way around them. Interestingly, so what you will see over the course of this recording, you will not see, most likely, a single woman smoking a cigarette. Not one. You'll see men. They don't smoke as much here as they do in the more westerly part of Eastern Europe, just in general. It seems like there's been a good push against that. No more smoking in restaurants or in bars. Looks like vaping might be treated, it is treated similarly in most places from what I've seen, because you'll have people going outside to vape. But then there are also places where, you'll see people doing it inside, and they'll be like, yeah, this is okay, I just need to pretend that I'm not doing it. It's interesting, but apparently that's a recent development last few years where that has changed, and I don't know how much that has changed the overall consumption. But anyway, yeah, so you will not see any women smoking cigarettes, which is really interesting. There is a strong social pressure, we'll say, kind of familial control on them. And so the way it's been explained to me is like if you date one, you'll either get married within a month or you'll get stabbed. Now, I don't know if that's true, but that's what was said to me. So interesting. But yeah, very, very strong family structure that does kind of, trying to think of a nice way to put it in public, weigh heavily on women here. You don't see them much in bars. Apparently they do go out a little earlier from what I've been told, but still, like, not like in the West where, bars can be anywhere from, 30 to 50% women at any given time. Here, it's probably going to be closer to 15. So that's interesting, and often with somebody. It's not like, it doesn't seem like it's a place that they go to socialize together as often or to meet people or anything like that. It's very interesting, the number of bars here. So there are a lot of bars, but only a very select few of them are busy. And just like a handful will be busy. And it makes you wonder, how does that work? I asked one of my buddies here, I said, my Lebanese buddy, I asked him, I said, hey, this seems really odd to me. How many bars are here that are just empty? Like, it doesn't seem like there's enough patrons to keep them afloat. And I said, what is it? Is it a money laundering thing? Like, what's going on? He said it could be. He said, I don't know. But it is weird. So, a lot of bars that don't do a lot of business. The best bar in town, as pretty much agreed by everybody I've talked to, is Beatles Pub. And it's like a rock bar. They actually play a lot of metal. I haven't heard any Beatles there, I don't think. But on day 2, they started treating me like a regular, like very kind. First time I went in, ordered beer, was just playing on my phone, and the bartender's like, hey, you want a shot? And I was like, yeah, sure. And I figured it's like 50-50 chance I'm going to get charged for the shot. And so hopefully he's not pouring anything expensive, and he doesn't. He pours us some Jack. And anyway, does not charge me at all. And then I go to tip him, and he's like, I did not do that for the money. And I'm like, well, let me tip you anyway. Like, that was very kind. I appreciate it. And so then he, when I insisted, he did accept. But just did it just to be kind. And now every time I go in there, like, and it wasn't because of that, because, people, I went downstairs where nobody even knew about it, and they instantly started treating me like gold too. So now I go in there, and I'm treated like I've been going there every day for the last, 5 years. But again, it wasn't the tip. It was just the kindness of the people. They're just good people. So then let's see, wandered into into what's called they call it an ethnic pub, and by that, what I'm told is apparently like they don't like to let locals in, because what was said to me was that they go in and they start fights. I don't know. It's hard to imagine. But then I have also been told, just like that, you date a local girl, you're either going to get married very fast or you're going to get stabbed. So, I mean, there could be flaring tempers periodically that I have not seen. But anyway, so yeah, they tend not to let the locals in there. Here's one of those, this thing has 7 fountains on it. One of them appears to not be where I would expect it to be. But anyway, and that place was like 40% Iranian, and then some Russians, and I think a few locals. I think there were a few. But everybody very kind, treat you like gold. Like last time I was there, met an Armenian Iranian who had repatriated and would not let me buy a drink. Like, he had my drinks paid for before I ordered them, and he was like, yeah, no, you're not buying one, there's no way. And yeah, so like, such an amazing gesture in a country where, the average wage, from what I've looked up, appears to be, minimum wage I think is 300 euros a month, so $330. Average wage is about $700 a month, so $770. And a beer, like a cheap beer, because I drink cheap beer, a cheap beer is $2. And so that would make the rough equivalent, if my math is right, that would make the rough equivalent, if it were the U.S. with the average wages there, to that beer costing like $11.50. So, imagine that. And then somebody not just getting you one, but demanding that they're going to continuously do it. It's amazing. And I have encountered this a lot in Eastern Europe. It's a little uncomfortable for me as somebody who doesn't really accept gifts well. But it is a cultural thing, and I kind of decided, okay, I'm not going to turn it down, because it feels good to do nice things for people, and I'm not going to tell people they can't. And also, it's, I don't want to be culturally disrespectful either in that respect. So, yeah, it's really like, I can't think of a good word for it. It's just so incredibly generous and kind and friendly. Then let's see, same bar, met an Armenian Canadian who, he was born here. Over there is Mother of Armenia. You can see the statue up there. We'll zoom in real quick. Mother of Armenia there. But yeah, so there we go. Met that dude and his Russian buddy, and we got to talking, and he's like, hey, we're going to pay you a Russian club. You want to come? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. That's an experience. And so go there and have a really, really great time. Just everybody's happy to talk to an American, which is a nice feeling, especially when we're talking about a lot of Russians being there. But it's interesting because what you find in Europe is that the Russians in Europe left Russia for a reason, and they are happy to be gone. Some of them it's because of the war. Some of them it's other political issues. Like, one thing that I was told, actually by two of the guys, because I've met a couple of Russian gay guys here, and they have said that they are basically designated as, so LGBT is basically treated as a terrorist group there, so they are effectively designated as terrorists in Russia, which is just wild, because, like, however you feel about it, I mean, however you feel about other people's life choices, like them or not, to say that's terrorism is pretty unique position to take. Like, very much not what we would expect as Americans. So it's really interesting in particular to meet the Russians who have moved abroad, because they have such unique perspectives on things. Because there's a reason they left. But anyway, let's see. What else? My Lebanese buddy. So he runs a pizza and taco shop here. And really good. Like, the tacos are really good. I haven't eaten the pizza, but the tacos are really nice. Not American in nature. They're probably the closest thing I've had to American tacos outside of Netherlands, where they actually do a pretty decent job. Sweeter, more like a barbecue, but with a nice, like, resonating, simmering heat. It's not spice forward. Instead, the spice lingers, which is generally how spice should be. Like, there's no reason to make it painful. You can make it just kind of sit with people. I was really impressed with that. But anyway, we got to talking, and he moved here because Lebanon did a thing where the country essentially stole 93% of the wealth. And so if you had, for example, $100 in an account over there, then you would have $7 after that. I'm going to hit pause on this conversation real quick and just say right up there, I think that's it's the Opera House, but right out in front of there was a massive protest. I actually completely glazed over something really important from recent history I'll come back to in a minute. But massive protests there on Saturday. And anyway, though, so he was like, he lost however much he lost. He didn't tell me exactly how much, but probably not an insignificant amount. And so he decided, yeah, let that happen once, and time to go. I don't blame him. Like, taxes are one thing, but just, like, taking your wealth that you've paid taxes on, that you've accumulated, just saying, this is ours now, you can't do that. Unless you can. But obviously, anybody with any ambition or means is going to run away from that, because you don't want to see that happen twice. So he came over here and opened his shop, and is doing a really good job of it. Has 2 locations. He does find the dating culture here rather slightly. That seems to be kind of a big complaint. And he shared with me that apparently within like the last 5 to 7 years, there was actually a major corruption problem where there was essentially like mafia-style protection racket being run against the businesses. And it's like, pay me $5K or else. And so that was a thing. And then another thing that happened at one point was he got pulled aside by another local business owner and brought a bunch of people into the room, locked him in there, and beat him. He was able to escape, but there's no telling if he hadn't escaped how bad that could have gotten. So very, very interesting that happened so recently in a place that feels so calm, structured, peaceful, very Western feel. But the good news is he said that the most recent government came in and they had an anti-corruption initiative that apparently was very effective. So you see a lot of cops. I don't know if you've actually seen a lot of cops right now, but sometimes you'll see, just like earlier I saw a van of police officers just driving along to somewhere. Sometimes you'll see like 7 or 8 of them on a corner, and sometimes you just see 1 or 2. And then you'll see the cruisers just driving along with their lights on. Not like they've got somewhere to be, but more like, hey, don't forget, we're here. And probably more as a deterrent, which in a situation like what was described to me seems rather smart. Like, Americans would not be able to fathom the idea of the police just driving around with lights on, but in a situation like that, when it makes sense. The only downside is I did see a situation where a cop was trying to get through. He had his lights on, and people were not moving, and so he had to get on the microphone and tell him to get out of the way. So, and start also blipping his siren. So, it is kind of like Boy Who Cried Wolf sort of scenario. But from a deterrence perspective, smart. The scooter reminds me. So motorcycle culture here is developing. It is, you don't see a whole lot of proper motorcycles, or even that many scooters. You see some, and actually there are 3 or 4 guys at Beatles Pub who ride, and one of them told me he was towards the beginning of motorcycle culture beginning here. He can't be, 24. So interesting to see that motorcycles have not really been much of a thing over here, until recently, where it's been developing. They do 2 fingers down here to greet each other. They do it when they're on foot as well. The shaka would not make sense to them. But I explicitly asked, like, how do I greet bikers? So that was interesting to me. But yeah, so back to the recent issue. So there's an ongoing conflict with Azerbaijan over, I'm not going to try to pronounce the region's name. It's hyphenated, and I don't remember all the letters, and so I'm not going to try to pronounce it because I'll mess it up. I don't even know where to start. But it's like Nagorno something. That much I know, so I do know where to start. Like, the other starts with a K, and that's where I'm going to give up. And I should walk this way. But anyway, so there's been this tension there where basically Azerbaijan took and held a territory, but then kicked out a bunch of ethnic Armenians. And so that protest that I was describing a few minutes ago, that protest was related to the handling, at least this is what I was told. Obviously, I don't speak Armenian, but there was a very specific flag display that relates to that region and the idea of unification. And so apparently that protest was related to the way the current government has handled the aftermath of that, and haven't apparently taken good care of the people who were expelled from that region. Expelled seems like a pretty light term for what was done there. You force people out of their homes. Ethnic cleansing is probably a more firm term for that. And so apparently people here are not all that satisfied with the support given to those people who were expelled. And that's what they were protesting. And of course there were plenty of police officers and whatnot, but it was very chill, very calm. People were very peaceful about it. There were speakers. I didn't even know it was a protest at first. I wasn't sure until I asked around. I wasn't sure whether it was a protest or just like an assembly for some sort of I don't know, national, like initially I thought it could be a holiday. So really, really peaceful, calm demonstration, nothing at all uncomfortable about it. And and I think for the most part, like, you can see this place works well. Today there was some rain. The streets did not work all that well. As you can tell from my 2 trips during this, the sidewalk is not as even as I might be accustomed to, but that's an Eastern European thing. This is apparently made of tires and I think steel. Really cool. But anyway, but yeah, the streets were flooded earlier today. Had to take a really long route to get where I was going. Checking out the bus station, or rather the bus service to Tbilisi. And I'm not going to climb this while doing the video. It'd be way too clunky in every respect. But anyway, so, you always want to go to your bus location before you need to, because on occasion I have gone to where I expected a bus to be and there wasn't a bus there. So, you don't want that to be a last minute thing that you discover that, oh, this isn't where the buses run from. And actually I discovered I had exactly that situation the first time I scouted here, where it was not the location for the bus. So anyway, and I have to figure that out today because I am leaving tomorrow at 1 o'clock. And so go walking, and just surrounded by rivers in the streets, probably 6-7 feet wide. Like, you're not getting through them without getting wet, and unfortunately, my shoes are not waterproof, and they're not even boots anymore, so they are not at all suitable for traversing something like that. But it's kind of one of those things, it's a Eastern European thing, actually, I'd say, where everything works great until it doesn't, and then you have to improvise. So, you find another path, or you make another path by walking on a like a little wall to a scooter that's parked in the puddle, and then using the scooter as a step and jumping, things like that. But there's an element of improvisation that comes with Eastern Europe in a lot of respects. But for the most part, everything works very smoothly in a lot of these places. And I'd say in all of them, actually, they've all been very, very chill, very functional, minimal challenges. But yeah, it's an incredible culture. The people are amazing. The people are very friendly. They're very kind. The city's very comfortable. It's about 1 million people. And I had previously felt like, okay, right-sized city for me, 600, 800,000 people, somewhere in there. Not too small, not too big, but between Thessaloniki and here, I've kind of decided we can up the higher limit on that. I'm not sure how high we can go. If it gets so big that it's sprawling to the point that you can't actually traverse it, that's not going to be worthwhile. But these sorts of places are not that way. So yeah, we can up that upper limit. Probably, I'm thinking right now, like up to 1.5. But anyway, yeah. What have I missed? My Lebanese buddy, he's another one of the people who just I bought my meal at his place, and then we got to talking. And after that, like, I'd be walking by and say hello, and he'd be like, "Hey, you want a coffee?" And we'd sit and drink coffee. Or when we went out for beers, he was like, "I am buying the beer." And I was like, "Well, let me get the second round." He's like, "Sure, whatever." And then when it's time for the second round, like, he won't let me do it. The kindness in this region, and by this region I mean the East and probably the Middle East as well, is just flooring. It's hard to find flaws. Now, there are things like, walking 5 abreast on the sidewalk, which, of course, as I say that, you don't see it. There are things like the cutting in line. There are some big things, like women being under strong control of their families, marrying and having kids at like 18, 19, that being normal, that do not really agree with my sensibilities, or Western sensibilities in general, but every place has its quirks and good and bad, and that's not to say that all perspectives are equal. They cease to be equal when people cease to be treated as equals. That's when a perspective itself, when you start treating other people worse, that's when the perspective itself becomes inferior, in my eyes. On the other hand, you still have to, when you visit different places, you have to be prepared for that. And you have to accept that there will be things that you might not like, might not believe in, might think are just outright wrong, that are normal in that place. And there is nothing you can do about it, and no value in saying anything about it, because it's not going to change anything, not from an outsider. But what you also see is that Europe, for the most part, runs a little behind the US in a lot of change. So it will probably be 30 to 50 years before you start seeing women, smoking, if anybody's smoking in 30 to 50 years, or going to bars at the rate that men do, or things like that. But it will happen. This stuff always comes around. So, you can be upset about it, you can be annoyed by it, you can be bothered by it, you can do whatever you want, but there's light at the end of the tunnel in terms of the equality element, and not really a lot to be gained from being too upset. It is what it is sort of scenario. And, you just look at those things and figure, well, every place has things that are good and bad about it. But for the most part, I don't see this place being a place that I would be comfortable living long term. But at the same time, I've really enjoyed certain aspects of it, and particularly the friendliness of the people. Because the people are just absolutely incredible people. Very kind. Yeah, that's about all you can ask, is that people treat you well. And they certainly do here. So, I'm really glad I made it out to Yerevan. I would like to, at some point, do a little more of the scenic aspects. That's not usually the way I travel. But I do think I'm probably missing some things by staying in the big city, which is where most people live. This is actually experiencing the bulk of Armenian culture, because this is where the bulk of Armenians live. But there would be some very historic, very old sites that I am not getting to experience. And, that's, this is apparently the Armenian Missionary Association of America. I noticed the American flag there, and I was wondering, what is this? It's not big enough to be an embassy. Our embassies are like little military bases. But yeah, I have really enjoyed the people here and the hospitality. And it's something that I think that we can do a lot better with at home, is to, we're so used to people visiting the U.S. that we don't really think much of it. We might give them a few tips here and there. We might say, yeah, check this out, check that out. But we pretty much never culturally go over the top and like pull somebody in and, drag them along with us to places and buy them drinks and things like that. At least nowhere near the level of here and other parts of Eastern Europe. And so I think we can do a lot better with that and create some really meaningful experiences and connections with people who are visiting the U.S. But yeah, other than that, you'll find that the streets are very filled, very lively, even if the bars are not. There will be people out walking 11, 12, 1 at night, like in the central area, which we passed through toward the beginning. There will be tons of people out there. And that's really pretty cool because you can feel the life in the city that way. But again, if you actually want to talk to people and get to know people, you need them to be stationary. You can't be running up to random people on the street unless you have a specific and fairly legitimate question, and then have a meaningful connection. You've got to have somebody who's sitting in a place for a while. And that's where bars come in. And only a couple of those where you can really, like Kalume, that's the ethnic pub, and Beatles, and at least on the weekend pave, which is a little bit out of the center, about a 20-something minute walk. But all around, really cool place, really good people, really kind people. Not expensive for your typical American travel, so to speak. Like, Americans are accustomed to spending way too much when they travel because America's way too expensive. And because the places that Americans go are way too expensive. Like, Americans, you're not going to see a bunch of Americans here. I don't know if I have met a single American here or heard a single American here. I might have the other day, but I doubt it. And this is regularly walking within a city of 1 million people, and I'm just not encountering Americans. Because these aren't the types of places we go. We go to, and somebody else commented on this to me, either here or in Cyprus. I don't remember which, but commented that, yeah, Americans go to London, they go to Paris, they go to Rome, and then they go home. And that's a mistake. That is absolutely a mistake. And I'll say it over and over and over again. Like, any American is in a position where they can travel. You have to save, but there is somewhere you can go and experience something different, and you'll be better for it. On your budget, you can do it. But you have to be willing to try something different. Paris is never going to be cheap. London is never going to be cheap, though it's not nearly as expensive as I expected. Apartment here, 1 bedroom, $200 for a week. Granted, this is probably the off season, but the weather's beautiful. Meal out, that's where it gets a little pricey. And particularly if you consider the average local salary, like I said, about $770 a month. And so you go out to dinner, and yeah, you can eat for, I guess, actually, there are places. Today I stumbled onto one where you could have had lunch for, I basically ate 2 meals because I wanted to try things. But probably for about $4. I probably spent 8, maybe 7. But there are a few places like that. Like that was a food court at a grocery store where they were cooking all the food fresh. Like they had raw meat laying there on skewers, and you pick the skewer and they cook it on the spot for you. Wait like 15-20 minutes and it's done. Seemed like quite a while, but it took a minute. And they were baking bread and all sorts of stuff. It was really good, and a good value and a great variety. And that's pretty cool. I really enjoyed that. I wish I had discovered it sooner because the value was there and the quality was there. And I actually noticed as I was eating my second meal, one of the guys who cooked the meat, he was just kind of like watching, and apparently just watching the American enjoy something that he hadn't had before. And I gave him a thumbs up and mouthed that it was good because he spoke English, and he'd smiled and nodded and then went back to work. But yeah, so but most of the restaurants, you're looking at $10 to $20. And that's interesting, again, relative to a $770 a month wage for the locals. That's expensive. And even for America, that's not dirt cheap. That's basically, I don't know, 2020 prices. Maybe 2015 prices. With the higher end being kind of like now prices, really close to it. So, but another thing I did notice here is that it doesn't feel like there's a really big middle ground. It seems like a lot of the places are fairly nice, and then a lot of places are fast food. And you do have some taverns that should theoretically be middle ground, but they seem to sit a little closer to the relatively nice price than I would have expected. And I think the reason for this, and it's really, really, really unfortunate for the people who live in lesser earning societies, food, anywhere you go, meat costs pretty much the same, at least in terms of Europe to the US. There will be places where like ground beef might be $1 less a pound. But prices are pretty similar. And so post-COVID, how do these businesses make money? I'm just not sure how the locals afford to keep them afloat. And again, a beer being $2, like, that is about 2020 prices. Maybe again, 2015. Like, that's a pretty, that's not that long ago, in terms of America. And the pricing there, it's just not that long ago. And then, you know, you've got a country like this where they earn so much less paying that for the cheap beer. Again, capital city, things are always more expensive in a capital city, but your cheapest beer being the equivalent of $11.50 for the average person is pretty wild. So it's interesting, and what I tend to see is that it seems like life in Eastern Europe would be a lot harder for a local. For somebody with an American income, it would be a lot easier. But for a local, it would be a lot harder. And when you pair that with the fact that they don't seem absolutely miserable, and that they're kind and generous and just amazing people, it's really just impressive in terms of like the character of the people. So, yeah, I would say definitely a good place. I'm glad I came here. I would say it'd be a good place to visit. It's not like a place where you go and you like crash through a bunch of sites. You'd be done in 2 days. But unless you're doing museums and stuff. But I don't see why anybody would when you have Wikipedia. I'd rather experience the culture. But like, if you want to experience the culture and come for about a week and see some sights along the way, maybe do one of those tours to see the scenic stuff that I should have gone to see and probably will someday, then it'd be a good spot for it. Be a really good spot for it. Not going to cost you a fortune. Most expensive part would probably be your food over the course of the week. Either that or your plane ticket. But even again, 1-bedroom apartment, completely decent, $200 for the week. So, well worth visiting. Really glad I came. And I'm looking forward to seeing Tbilisi, Georgia. That should be an adventure.